Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is November 18th. On this day in 1978, more than 900 people, members of the People's Temple led by Jim Jones, died in and around a remote agricultural commune in Guyana known as Jonestown. The day began with a U.S. congressional fact-finding trip and ended with coordinated murders and a mass poisoning that remains one of the deadliest single days for American civilians outside of natural disasters or 9/11. Today, we're talking about the Jonestown Massacre. Let's get started. When Jim Jones began the People's Temple in the 1950s, no one would have thought it would have ended the way that it did. He began by preaching racial integration, equality, and socialism. By the early 1970s, the group had relocated to California and grown in influence, gaining political support and national attention. But as media scrutiny intensified, reports from defectors painted a darker picture. One of rigid control and harsh punishments. There were staged loyalty tests, drug use by Jones, and white knight rehearsals that simulated mass suicide. In 1977, facing multiple investigations and mounting pressure, Jones moved hundreds of his followers to a remote settlement in Guyana, South America. He described it as a self-sufficient socialist paradise. Jonestown. In reality, the commune was isolated, under-resourced, and heavily guarded. Members had limited contact with the outside world, and those who expressed doubts faced punishment, threats, or separation from family members. In Jonestown, dissent was dangerous. Concerned relatives and former members in the U.S. continued to sound the alarm. California Congressman Leo Ryan responded by organizing a fact-finding mission. He and a small delegation, including journalists, concerned family members, and aides, arrived in Guyana's capital, Georgetown, on November 14, 1978, and reached Jonestown a few days later. Initially, the Ryan delegation was met with rehearsed hospitality. Temple members sang songs, performed skits, and praised their new life in Guyana. But beneath the surface, unease was growing. That same day, several residents began slipping notes to visitors, pleas to help them leave. By the next day, November 18th, tension had escalated. During the visit, Temple member Don Sly attacked Ryan with a knife. He was subdued, and the congressman insisted on continuing. Ultimately, more than a dozen defectors were cleared to leave with Ryan's party. Because of the larger group, a second aircraft had to be arranged, delaying their departure from the nearby Port Kaituma airstrip. While the group waited to board, a tractor pulling a trailer filled with Temple loyalists arrived. Armed men opened fire. Congressman Ryan was killed, along with NBC correspondent Don Harris, cameraman Bob Brown, San Francisco Examiner photographer Greg Robinson, and Temple defector Patricia Parks. Several others, including Ryan aide Jackie Spearer, were seriously wounded. Back in Jonestown, news of the ambush reached Jim Jones. That evening, he summoned residents to the Central Pavilion. Audio from that gathering, later recovered by the FBI and cataloged as the death tape, captures Jones urging followers to commit what he called revolutionary suicide. He claimed that U.S. forces would descend on the community in retaliation and that death was their only honorable option. Cyanide, sedatives, and a grape-flavored drink, Flavor-Aid, not Kool-Aid as is often misreported, were prepared in large vats. Survivors later recounted how children were killed first, often by syringe. Armed guards reportedly stood watch, ensuring compliance. Some drank voluntarily. Others were coerced, injected, or forced. By nightfall, more than 900 people lay dead in and around the pavilion, including Jim Jones himself, who died of a gunshot wound. While the mass death in Jonestown dominated headlines, it wasn't the only site of violence. In Georgetown, at the People's Temple's headquarters, longtime member Sharon Amos received a radio order from Jones. That night, she took the lives of her 3 children and then died by suicide, the only fatalities in the capital. In total, 918 people died on November 18, 1978. 909 in Jonestown, 5 at the Port Kaituma airstrip, and 4 in Georgetown. Roughly 1/3 of the dead were children. Only a handful survived the mass poisoning, some by hiding, others by fleeing into the jungle, and a few by being away on assignments that day. The Jonestown tragedy gave rise to one of the most enduring and problematic phrases in American slang, drinking the Kool-Aid. But this distorts both the facts and the human toll. First, investigators confirmed that the powder drink was flavored, not Kool-Aid. But more importantly, framing the event as a collective suicide ignores the coercion, fear, and violence that many of the followers experienced. Survivors and scholars have stressed that many of the dead in Jonestown did not die by suicide. They were murdered. Children had no choice. Some adults were held at gunpoint, and others tried to resist and were injected. While Jim Jones preached voluntary death, the reality was far more complex and brutal. The U.S. military recovered the bodies and flew them back to Dover Air Force Base. It was a grim operation that overwhelmed mortuary teams. Many of the dead were buried in mass graves. In the legal aftermath, Temple member Larry Layton, who had attempted to shoot passengers inside one of the planes, was eventually extradited, tried in the U.S., and sentenced to life in prison. He was released in 2002. Journalists who survived the airstrip attack, including Charles Cross of the Washington Post, later published accounts of the violence and the trauma. Jackie Spear, Ryan's wounded aide, recovered from her injuries and went on to a long career in Congress, where she often invoked Jonestown as a cautionary tale. The event continues to be the subject of books, documentaries, and retrospectives, not only about cult dynamics, but also about the systemic failures that allowed warning signs to go unheeded for so long. The story of Jonestown is one of the darkest chapters in modern American history. It began with a vision of justice and ended in horror. Remembering the full record, the airstrip ambush, the forced poisonings, and the children who were among the dead honors those who had little to no choice in what happened there. And that's important. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found today's episode compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day, True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!